Hell is a city, and that city is Manchester. Who knew? Welcome to my review for Hell is a City. You'll find all my other Hammer reviews in my Hammer Studios playlist. So let's just address the title of this film some more. If you heard the words Hell is a City and you'd not seen this film, you'd be forgiven for thinking of maybe Escape from New York or The Warriors, groups of hoodlums storming the streets and normal people afraid to leave their houses. You might even go a bit further than that and conjure up images of post-apocalyptic landscapes where zombies are running around or Terminators. But the hell in this movie is one bloke who's escaped from prison, and only about 10 people in the Met are aware of this ongoing situation. The other 99% of the population of Manchester are just carrying on, enjoying the swinging 60s, completely oblivious to all this. So the title of the movie is definitely an exaggeration, but I still like it. It's fun. The story for this film is basically this one cop, Harry Martineau, chasing after this criminal whose name is Don Starling or Sterling, I think. And this cop, Martineau, is a walking cliche. I mean, even his name, Harry Martineau, brings images of Harry Palmer or Harry Callahan. And his personality is so much like a whole bunch of other cops you've seen in films before. He's completely incorruptible. He's uncompromising, his methods are unorthodox, but he gets results. His underlings all worship him, but his boss likes to be a bit antagonistic with him. He's even got the obligatory marriage problems at home. But the marriage problems in this film are actually quite in-depth. It's not just a case of Martineau occasionally answering the phone in his office and on the other end you just hear... I can't actually think of another film where that's happened. But anyway... the marriage between Harry Martineau and Julia Martineau is quite complex, actually. It's sort of given away early in the film that Harry has always wanted to have kids, but his wife never has. Now, I'm guessing that at some point early on in their courtship, Julia did indicate that maybe one day she would like to have them, and Harry went along with that. But Julia's just never arrived at the moment where she wants to pull the trigger, and they're both getting on towards 40-ish now, the sort of age where if you've not had kids by that point, then it would be easy to think, well, is my time passing? And I think the way that Harry acts on the case in this film, he's all determined and he's playing the super cop. I think a lot of that is the fact that he's never been able to leave his legacy on the world by having kids, so he feels he's got to do it at work. He's got to try and be the world's best cop and do absolutely everything that he can in his powers, because at home he doesn't have the power seemingly to get the thing that he really wants. Now, reading between the lines, I'm guessing that one of the reasons why Julia Martineau has never come around to being in a position where she's wanted to have kids is because Harry is always spending so many hours on the job, and even when he's not on duty, he'll go to the pub and have a couple of drinks to try and forget about some of the things he's seen. But I think one of the reasons why Harry does this, spends so much time away from home, is because his house is so empty, he doesn't have kids. So it's like a vicious circle that these two people are in with their marriage, and they just can't come together and work it out. Every time they try and have a conversation about it, they just end up shouting at each other and nothing gets resolved. So it's quite a complex marriage situation for a short 90-minute film. The chase between cop and criminal, on the other hand, is a lot more simple. I mean, Pacino and De Niro in Heat, this isn't, I mean, Martineau follows a very basic set of clues in this film, and Don Starling, he's so inept. I mean, if he was a criminal in 2021, he'd be caught after about 5 minutes. But because this is 1960 and the police just didn't have the technology at their disposal, Starling is able to sort of wander around Manchester and Yorkshire and somehow not get caught for like the whole movie. Finally he does, but it's more to do with his incompetence than it is Martineau's brilliance as a detective. So the fun of this story is not watching great police work. It's more just getting to enjoy seeing a snapshot of British life in the early 60s. The people in this film talk a little bit funny. I don't know if this is just the way that people spoke to each other in the 60s, or whether it's just a case of the film hiring a bunch of actors who couldn't do a Mancunian dialect properly. I don't know. I'd have to sort of ask somebody from Manchester. And the people in this film talk so fast to each other. I mean, it took me a while in the first 10, 15 minutes to adjust, because Martineau would be talking to his partner and he'd be doing it at such speed, and his partner would be retorting really fast. It'd be like, guys, just slow the conversation down. I actually want to hear what you're saying properly. But I started to realize that this was just going to be like this for the whole movie, and my brain would have to adjust. And thankfully, it did. But at times, it's like watching a tennis match with the ball just going really low over the net and players hitting it really hard. So you're literally like, it does take some time to get adjusted to when you sit down to watch this. Another cliche is that Martineau, after his shifts, always goes to the same pub, and there just happens to be this gorgeous barmaid called Lucky. I'm not sure if that's her real name or whether it's a nickname, but she's about Martineau's age and she's single. It's mentioned that she used to have a husband, but when this story takes place, she's available and she absolutely lets Martineau know it. I mean, she flutters her eyelashes at him across the bar and lets him know in no uncertain terms that she would give him kids in an instant if he wanted that. I kind of think these scenes should have gone further and been set in a lounge bar instead of a pub. Martineau would walk in and Lucky would be playing a piano over in the corner, and she'd be wearing a red dress, and she'd come over to him and sit on the stool next to him. I'm not sure where I'm getting these images from, actually. Maybe I saw it in some kind of old crime noir film that was possibly set in Chicago, but it would be very easy for the audience to dislike this Lucky character, but she's actually quite likable. She puts across a very eloquent argument as to why Martineau should consider leaving Julia. The fact that he doesn't shows incredible resolve and strength of character, because he's clearly known this woman, Lucky, for quite some time. They do have quite an affection for each other, even though they've never taken that anywhere. They're a bit like James Bond and Moneypenny in a way. But ultimately, Martineau decides that he can't go off and have kids with this woman, Lucky, because even though that would give him what he wants most in the world, it's not worth it if it means breaking his wife's heart. And actually, this is the bravest thing that Martineau does in the movie, because as a cop, he's not that brilliant. You think he's going to be. At the start of this movie, you think, oh, this guy's going to be shooting bad guys for fun. He'll be shooting them behind his back and all sorts. But, I mean, he's a good cop, but he's not like a movie world good sort of cop, if you know what I mean. I mean, he can follow leads, he can delegate, he can interview suspects really well. He has a lot of the attributes which would make a good detective, but in a battle sort of situation, he's not that hot. I mean, in the finale of this film, when he finally bumps into Starling and they're about to have a set to on top of this roof, you think, oh, Martineau's going to kick some ass here. We've been waiting the whole movie for this. But he's not actually that good. He's quite naive. He calls out to Starling and gives his position away as a result. And I thought to myself, I'm not sure you should have done that. And then he steps out from behind a chimney and gets himself shot in the lungs. And it's just a bit silly how he just steps out and allows himself to be shot. And in the end, I mean, they start grappling, these two. But I think it would have gone ill for Martineau, but for the fact that some policemen come along and take Starling off him and put him in handcuffs. But I think what the film is saying is that, look, this is just a normal, good cop, not an exceptional cop, just a good cop. But if he has any kind of movie world superpower, it's the fact that he can be absolutely dedicated to his wife and do the right thing. So I've been talking a lot about cliches in this review. I think the normal cliched thing for a character like this would for him to be a super cop, but he's not very good at being a husband, and that's fine. But actually, Martineau, to my surprise, turned out to be a super husband and just a kind of average cop. There are a number of well-written female characters in this film. It's not just Lucky and Julia. There's also a mute woman who I started to like more and more as this film progressed. There's also a woman called Chloe, who is essentially the trophy wife of a wealthy bookie. But in the short amount of time we spend with Chloe, you can tell that she really has a hard time of things, just getting by in day-to-day life. Her husband is played by Donald Pleasance. I was absolutely delighted to realise that he's in this film because he has always been one of my favourite actors. His work throughout his career was so varied, and I think this is the earliest thing I've ever seen him in. When I try and think what movie after this I would have seen with Donald Pleasance in chronologically, it would probably be something like You Only Live Twice or The Great Escape, but then you're talking end of the 60s, surely. So I think Hell is a City is the earliest bit of Pleasance I have ever seen, and he's still 41 in this. I calculated it. He still doesn't have hair in this. God knows at what point Donald Pleasance lost his hair. Having seen him in Deathline from the early 70s, I know as well that he could easily have played Harry Martineau, although maybe he would have had to have worn a wig. I'm not sure that the women would have been diving on a balding Donald Pleasance, although it is Donald Pleasance, so who knows. I've also got to talk a little bit about Stanley Baker because I've never seen him in anything else apart from this, but he's really good in the lead role here. I get the impression from looking at some reviews on the internet that Stanley Baker was a little bit of a thing in 1960. He sadly died when he was just 48. Lung cancer got him. He looks sort of 40-ish in this movie, so his death would not have been too long after Hell is a City. But if this turns out to be the one and only Stanley Baker film I ever watched, then I've just got to say, thank you for this film, sir. You were really good in this. On a lighter note, I promised myself I would mention this really funny scene in the movie where all these characters are involved in some kind of gambling den out on the Yorkshire moors. There's about 50 blokes all in a circle, and they're doing some kind of coin throwing game where two coins go up in the air and they bet on the outcome of the two coins or something. I didn't really understand the rules of the game. There's like a ringmaster who's got like a big wad of money and he's taking bets from everybody, but I don't understand how he's taking these bets and remembering them because it's so frenetic. It's like there's people going, oh, I'll have 10 on this, I'll have 20 on that, I'll double up, I'll let that ride, and he's taking all this money. There's no notepad to make a record of this. So I'm thinking, well, surely people are just going to end up claiming that they had different bets to what they actually did. A similar thing happened in the Schwarzenegger film, The Running Man. There was a bookie in that film, and like hundreds of people stood in front of this bookie. There was like a chalkboard and various odds on the board, and people would be like, 200 on Richards, 60 on Fireball, and all this money would be changing hands and slips getting handed out. But it's so fast that I thought, how can any of this be getting recorded properly? But getting back to Hell is a City, even funnier than all this is the fact that the police turn up and everybody scarpers. So you get the sight of all these 40, 50-year-old Yorkshire blokes just running for the hills, and it really amused me. There's this one guy who gets cornered by two police cars against a wall, and he's like, oh, I'll give up. Now for my quibbles, I only really have two of them. One is that there's all this saxophone music, orchestral music, which plays over certain dialogue scenes. It's especially bad in an early moment when Don Starling's character is being established. He breaks into this pool hall and there's lots of talking going on, but there's also music going on, and I didn't want music in this particular scene, in such an important scene as well, setting up this character. Also, there's a moment later on when a woman gets elbowed in the face and there's clearly daylight between the elbow and the face. I get the fact that you can't elbow smash an actress for real, but they could make it a little bit more convincing than that. I'll quickly show you the copy of the film I have for this. It's only a DVD. They don't have a Blu-ray available for Hell is a City, but it's a very clear presentation. There's not much on it in the way of features, apart from an alternative ending, but it's more of an extra ending than an alternative ending. So in the alternative cut, the movie ends, and then there's one more scene, and then we cut to the credits. But the extra scene involves Martineau going home, and he has one more argument with his wife, except this time they work things out and Julia says, okay then, let's have kids. And then they sort of fall into bed and the camera moves sideways over to Martineau's police badge, and that's the last thing you see. But it's a very cheesy scene. I'm glad they dropped it. I just don't think that the movie should have ended like this. Now, don't get me wrong, I do like to think that after this film, Julia and Harry resolve things by having kids, but I just think that that should be left to our imaginations, you know, because the way that this film does finish is with Martineau walking down the street late at night. He's kind of looking all thoughtful. He's solved the case, you know, he's put Lucky on a bus. He doesn't have to worry about her anymore. His marriage is sort of unresolved, but I just think that's a good place for the film to finish. You know, we don't need the cheesy, rushed argument with Julia, which for some reason this time ends with her changing her mind about having kids. But that's not the version that they went for, so we don't need to bang on about it too much. Right, let's get to the bag of terror and find out what sort of score I'm going to give for this. So we've got 1, 2, 3 bloody axes out of 5. I quite enjoyed this film, and possibly I would watch it again in the future. I don't think it's a film that I would pull off the shelf randomly. I think I would have to be on some kind of really long Hammer marathon, but it's possible I could do something like that further down the line. As to whether I would recommend this film, it's not for everybody. You know, I think you should have a clear idea in your head about what you want to get out of a film like this. This is very different from a lot of the other Hammer films I've reviewed. I mean, my previous review was Paranoiac, which is also a thriller, but that is a lot closer in tone and feel to a lot of the Hammer horror films I'd been reviewing before that. If you're of an age that's similar to mine or younger there, and you don't have any connection to the time and place that Hell is a City takes place in, then I'm not sure you would massively enjoy this. It's entirely up to you. It is basically a crime noir thriller from days gone by, a long, long time ago. Some people may get something out of it, some people won't, but I quite enjoyed it as a one-off. Right, I will be back soon with another Hammer review of some sort. I haven't decided what my next one is going to be, other than the fact that there will definitely be one. Until next time, cheerio, bye-bye.